Shooting boards are one of those tools that if you're a hand tool worker, you're going to use it every day you're in the shop. But if you're a hybrid worker like me, it's one of those tools that comes in really handy when you need it. It's great for cutting small parts, it's great for shaving off just a little bit when you're trying to get that final fit. So I went ahead and designed a shooting board that's really going to suit my needs, because not only is it going to be able to shoot 90 degrees and 45 degrees, it's also going to have a 45 and 90 degree magnetic cutting guide. And you'll see when I demonstrate it at the end of the video that because it has a detachable fence, it can be used for planing very thin or thick materials. We're going to start by rough dimensioning our plywood. I went with a 12-inch wide shooting board because you're cross-cutting, you're never going to need anything wider than that. It's going to be 18 inches long so that I can still use it as a plane stop without having to reach too far out into my bench to use the shooting board portion. I went with 2 thicknesses of plywood, 3/4 inch for the table of the shooting board, and 3/8, which we're going to double up to make a track for the hand plane. The larger piece here will be attached to the bottom of the shooting board, and the 3-inch wide piece will be doubled up to raise the plane 3/8 of an inch. I find for really accurate cuts, extending your line with your combination square to the side of your piece helps line up the blade better. I apologize for my club hand here. I recently had hand surgery, but thankfully I won't have to wear this in future videos. The size of your bench hook really doesn't matter, so I used my old shooting board to measure out a piece I thought would work. And here you can get an idea of what it's going to look like. I also found this really cool piece of scrap walnut that was super figured and curly. I'm pretty excited to see what it looks like with finish on it. Spoiler alert, it looks really awesome. Before we can really see what it looks like, we've got to mill it to size. I started by joining one face and one edge and sending it through the planer. Thankfully, my blades were sharp and I didn't get too much tear out. We're going to start by squaring up the corners and laying out for the 2-piece fence. The magnetic cutting guide is going to be smaller width than the shooting board portion, but they're going to work in tandem together. I then switched over to my dado stack to cut the grooves for the detachable fence and the table of the shooting board. Thankfully, Josue was on hand to save the day when I dropped my blade stiffener into the dust collection chute.
Cherry Holmes.
Using a set of calipers, I got the exact middle of my fence and raised the dado stack to it. I then cut a dado in my fence and the table of my shooting board, which will later accept the plane stop and also be where the fence attaches to the shooting board. It's really important that these cuts are square, so make sure that your fence and everything else is set up correctly. Using my calipers again, I got the width of my dado. We're going to cut the key that goes into the table of the shooting board. It's really important that this is a tight friction fit, so make sure you cut a couple test pieces before committing to your final piece. Using a piece of walnut, I cut out my key. The length doesn't matter, so we'll trim it later. Then using my calipers again, I got the height of the dado, making sure that the key wouldn't be too tall. Before we do the final shaping on the fence and insert the magnets, let's put together the shooting board so it has time to dry. I'm going to put on the bench hook using glue and some pin nails. Then insert the plane stop key into the table of your shooting board, making sure that it's flush on the side that is your dominant hand. Here you can see how tight that friction fit needs to be. Attach your smaller piece of 3/8 inch plywood to the bigger piece and secure it with some pin nails and clamps. Make sure to clean up any squeeze out on the inside seam. On your dominant hand side of the shooting board, mark the location of the rail and attach. The length of this piece really doesn't matter, and in retrospect, I wish I had made it the length of my entire shooting board for extra support while I was hand planing. Now here comes the real critical part, laying out and shaping our fences and cutting guides. Now that we know this piece is square and parallel, we're going to go ahead and separate the cutting guide from the shooting board portion of our fence. To cut the 45-degree angles, I used my jointing jig and a couple clamps. It's really important here that you're comfortable with the way you're separating these. There's lots of ways to do this. Just make sure that you're completely comfortable with the way your equipment's set up. Here's a great example of thinking about a safe way to make your cuts. I really couldn't come up with a solution on this until I decided to use my crosscut sled, a stop block, and a pencil. Make sure to save these offcuts because we're going to need them in the next step. Using a set of calipers, I found the center of my cutting guide. Then I took the width and divided by 3 to find the location of my magnets. Using a center punch, I marked a location for the 9mm holes. And this is where we use our offcuts. By clamping them to the fence of our drill press, we can make drilling square holes a lot easier. Whatever size magnets you decide to use, make sure you drill a little bit deeper to allow room for the glue. Use this measurement to set the depth stop on your drill press. And once you have all your layout done, clamping your piece to the fence of your drill press makes it a lot easier. Make sure to check the depth for accuracy. You want the hole you drill for your magnets to be the exact same size, giving a perfect friction fit. Once you put them in, they're really not going to come out. Checking your measurements now is going to save you a lot of headache down the road. When I used to make my dovetail jigs from wood, I put in thousands of these same magnets. And here's what you're going to need. A putty knife to separate the magnets, a post to hammer the magnets home. It really helps if it's rounded to ensure the magnet seats just below the surface. I like to use the tip of my CA glue bottle to spread the glue around. If you don't, you'll create a puddle that will keep the magnet from seating. Using a putty knife to separate these really strong neodymium magnets really helps. Push the magnet in with the putty knife and slide away. If you pull away, you can pull the magnet with you. Using your rounded post and solid hammer, hammer the magnets home. Make sure they seat just below the surface. Wipe away any excess CA glue with your finger. And for a little extra flair, I took these steel letter stamps and labeled all of the sides. I did 45-degree cut, 90-degree cut, and then 45-degree shoot and 90-degree shoot. Now's a great time to trim your key. I like to leave mine a little bit long in case I ever need to attach a stop block or use the cutting guide outside the board. Then chamfer the edge of your key so that your cutting guide and shooting board go on with a very tight friction fit. You should have to use a mallet to tap them over. I then went ahead and sanded everything up to 180, gave it a coat of spray lacquer, and waxed it up. I like to wax all my shop jigs because they're always going to be getting a lot of friction. It really helps them last and helps your tools slide smoothly when using them. Before I leave you with this super skookum cinematic William Walker inspired montage of me using this, I just want to say thank you. I'm about to hit 10,000 subscribers. I'm going to do a Q&A and do a big giveaway. So please leave your questions down in the comments, and I'll give you details on this giveaway coming up. Check me out on Instagram, and truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching. This is a wonderful community, and your comments, your likes, and your shares really inspire me to keep making content. Thank you so much, and here you go.